Oh, hey, buddy. It's your old pal Scott, and this is Let's Talk Tabletop. Today, I'd like to introduce you to a new mass battle game for miniatures where you use any miniatures from any genre, from any game, and you can smash them together. Sci fi, modern, historical, fantasy, literally anything you can think of. And you create the stats for the units using the system, and you can make flyers, you can make transports, you can make infantry, cavalry, terrain pieces, anything you want. I'm really proud of it. It's called Mass Brutality, and let's dive into it. So I'm sure you're familiar with normal war games where they tell you what each unit does. This is a Federation runabout, and it has a movement of blank and a hit points of blank, and this is the armaments, and this is the different war gear options and that sort of thing. Well, I take a completely different approach to this, and it is based on the Brutality Skirmish war game core rules, but it's a huge expansion of it. In Brutality, there's no such thing as transports like that Land Raider or transports like this runabout. In normal Brutality, there's no such thing as flyers like this Helldrake or this runabout. Now, there are, you know, individual cavalry units. There's individual, ranged or melee or whatever, but they're not in units of groups of people. So this is expanding that greatly. A normal Brutality game is about 7 points. You're talking probably five-ish pieces, right? A normal game, a full game for Mass Brutality is 50 points, and you've got way more people. It's a different scope. So instead of one person having a normal human being in Brutality would have 3 hit points generally, a whole module of 3 humans each have 1 hit point in Mass Brutality. So the scale is a little bit different, but it is so customizable with all the different things that you can do. Now, I know a lot of people already have existing armies from other games, and I want to make this as low a bar as possible for entry. So what I've done is I've taken the liberty of making pre-made 25-point lists. If this were Warhammer, you could say 25-point list is about 1,000 points, 900-point game. It's a small game, but I have statted out free rules for just a smattering of different units that you might have from different types of games. It's just generic. You can have an all robot army, you can have knights, you can have vampires, you can have anything like that. Another really exciting thing about this game is that I've made it so that you can play guerrilla formations, which is your typical unit where they could be an inch from each other, but they're not in a normal formation. Or you can play regimental formation, which is this rank and flank that you're familiar with Old World and old Warhammer Fantasy Battles and Kings of War. And what's fantastic about this is that both types of players, I can play guerrilla, you can play rank and flank, and they can fight against each other. Guerrilla has certain advantages, rank and flank has certain advantages, and they're both really interesting to play against. And what's also really cool? I realize a lot of people that might want to try this game do not have D10s, which is what all of my games use. Then this game is designed around D10s as well. But I have been able to make a conversion from D6 to D10. And you can play this game with D6s instead of D10s. I can play D6s and my opponent can play D10s. And it's balanced. It's fantastic. I actually forgot to mention this is alternating activation. This is not I activate my entire army, you activate your entire army. Nope. I activate one unit and then you activate one unit. And we go on until they're all activated. It's very simple. It's very fast. And we've had a blast with it. It's so fun. I can play regimental formations like Old World, and my opponent can play guerrilla formations like Age of Sigmar, and I can play D6s and they can play D10s if they wish, and it pans out beautifully. I've tried to make this as universal and widely appealing as possible and just customizable out the wazoo. So let's dive into this a little bit. Unit creation. You buy modules and you can buy up to 6 modules for a unit, and they all have to be the same type, with the exception of adding an attached support to it. So support is the only class out of melee, fast, ranged, and unique that can attach to other people, to other units. So let's say this unit of handgunners right here, this is 4 modules, it's 3 people per module, and you might be able to see these 4 dice right there, each representing 3 hit points. I could, in my list building, add a wizard and now he is attached to the unit, and he goes along with them, and he does his powers or whatever. If I didn't want to use magic instead, I could stat out a bannerman, and I'm going to say that that bannerman is inspiring to them, and he's going to be able to make them reroll hits or whatever, depending on how I stat it out. And now he's attached to the unit. His points get added to the unit and everything else. Now, these are individual models that are on like one tray if you're doing like a rank and flank sort of thing. I also really enjoy multi-basing things. Each one of these runners in Chitara's unit, that you notice there's 3 people per base. Each one of those modules is 3 hit points and 3 people. And they are all on individual bases, so it's very easy to see where your modules begin and end. Another way to do it is like this little dirt king here. He's on his palanquin and he's being carried and he's got his knights there. I usually run that is 3 elite modules and a support attached of some sort. So each one of these little guys is a module, and then he's the attached support. Now, obviously, this is one piece, so even if I lose a module, I can't take people off the base. It's just static, kind of like Kings of War, where people don't get removed from the base. It's just static until the whole unit's dead, but they do lose attacks in this game. As you lose modules, you lose shots that they had, you lose melee attacks that they had, that sort of thing. Same thing with my Robert Burbles here. They are small, and they're much smaller than humans, so I like to put 5 per base, because they're much smaller than humans. I would also say something like that for grots or gremlins or anything like that. Now, this guy right here, I usually run as 4 or 5 modules, and remember, you can have up to 6. And I like to attach a support to this because they teleport. Obviously, they have transporters on the Federation ships, so I can actually teleport people. I also like to make this a transport. So the way transports work in this game, very briefly, is that, let's say this is a total of 4 modules. Well, as a transport, if he gets that model ability called transport, he can hold up to 4 modules. So Chitara and company could all fit in here. Or he could fit in here. Or these 4 handgunner units without the attached support could fit in here. And then, when it's their time to activate, they can get out of it. They can also get back into it. Now, you might wonder what actually differentiates things, and not only do you get to change their stats, you pick a class, you pick an upgrade, and you get to change their stats. You also pick model abilities for every single module in the unit. So the bigger the unit, the more powerful it is, because they all get the benefits of all the units they were originally created with. The difference is that all of your eggs are in one basket. If I confuse that entire unit, they're confused and they have to make checks. So it's a higher risk, higher reward sort of thing. Now let's say that I take 2 modules of these handgunners and they're just basic ranged. Well, this is 2 modules of basic ranged intercessors. What's the difference? Well, there's an awful lot of difference. Even if they're the exact same class, they're both basic ranged, so their starting stats will be the same. But I can immediately add to either one of their movement, their fight skill, their dexterity, their willpower, their save, or give them 6-inch ranged weapons, so they're even more devastating in short range, kind of like rapid fire. So I can do that, of course. They would get a +1 save, while they don't, probably, because they're in t-shirts. That sort of thing. That's one level of differentiation between 2 identical on paper units. But then keep in mind that they get 2 model abilities and they get 2 model abilities. So I might give them shielding and fearless, and I might give them point blank and piercing. Now they're even more differentiated, even though they're both just basic ranged. Another level of differentiation, not only the unit traits that I give them, like +1 save or whatever, or the unit abilities that I give them, such as shielding and fearless, but also then you have faction traits and faction abilities. You pick one ability to apply to everybody in your army. So you very well may pick shielding for Space Marines, so that they all get the +1 save as long as the enemy's not getting rear arc. But that'll apply to their tanks, that'll apply to their flyers, that'll apply to their troops. That faction ability applies to everybody. Then you pick a faction trait, which might be teamwork or avenging or one of, I think I've got like 15 faction traits. And the faction trait's really cool because the faction trait gives them a constant buff on top of that. and such as +1 save within 4 inches of an allied unit, something like that. But not only that, there's 2 feats for each faction trait, as anybody that's already familiar with brutality would already know. But the new thing for mass brutality is the God Hand. Because of the setting of this game, the different gods make the great game in the amphitheatrum, and it's a world that they created very similar to Ishtar's Brutal Realm, but they don't know about Ishtar's Brutal Realm. And they all pick armies from all different times and dimensions and make them fight in campaigns to see who wins, and then of course they get boasting rights, etc., for being the patron god. Well, if the game is going especially bad for you and you're losing by at least 8 points, you get to activate your God Hand. And that is an extremely powerful ability where your patron god, whoever you choose, actually comes down and passes their hand over the whole board. Like if you have the horror faction trait, it gives every enemy unit a panic token, which is crazy. If you chose Avenging for your Space Marines, you count up how many modules you've lost this game, and there's a time slip for every one of those, and you dish them out to your different units however you want, which is really crazy. If you're on an objective that is really important to you, you can just give all 15 time slips to that unit, and they are not going anywhere. That sort of thing. So there's a lot of customization. So between these 2 units that are technically identical, they could have different stats, they could have different abilities, they could have different faction abilities, and they could have different faction traits. Not to mention, I could give one of them a legendary trait as well. So a legendary trait would give them an extra -1 to enemy saves when they attack them. Or that sort of thing. You know, these guys could be super mobile or whatever. So legendary traits are another level of that. This game is extremely customizable. I tried to include every single type of unit you could possibly include in a mass battle war game. So you can have anything from Titans all the way down to Robert Burbles from Thundercats. It's very, very customizable. I personally really enjoy using whatever miniatures I want. Okay, obviously these are Games Workshop pieces. But these Starfleet personnel are 3D printed. This runabout is 3D printed. This terrain piece is 3D printed. These guys, a lot of them are HeroClix miniatures or third-party miniatures. He's 3D printed, and they're also 3D printed. So if you have a resin printer or a PLA printer, you can just go to town. I got to tell you, I have a pile of projects over there that are all in different various forms of production because it's just a kid in a candy store. Like I'm just gobbling up everything I can find in order to make these armies of my dreams. I have a full Starfleet army now. I have a full Thundercats army now. I have a full Dirtkin army now, or Earthkin I think they're called. But anyway, I've got all these fantastic armies, and I'm so excited about it. So hopefully, if you like customization in your armies, if you are sick of being told how a unit must act on the board, if you are sick of your armies or your units either being bad in the next edition of a game or just completely cut from the game altogether, or if you love 3D printing your own miniatures, or if you love a game that actually has concrete checks and balances in it for when you are losing or your opponent's losing, there's a real chance of turning it around. That's the type of game I've made, and this is the type of game that you will enjoy. So hopefully you will give myself or any other independent creator in this space a chance to check out their games and see if you like them. Brutality Skirmish War game has a pretty large and pretty avid fan base, but they've never done it in mass. And that is what we can do now, which just excites me to no end. I am very against power creep. Any future upgrades or legendary traits that are added are specifically meant to be on par with what already exists. And by the way, there's 4 new upgrades and 6 new faction traits in this book compared to Brutality. So there is a lot to love about this, and there's a lot of different things you can do. So hopefully This video has been informative for you, and I would really love it if you would check out my new book or any of my books at brutalityskirmishwargame.com. And you can click on the shop now. It'll bring you to our Lulu, our publisher's page, and it's got every single book I've made. This is book number 8 that I have produced since 2020. I'm extremely proud of myself. Sorry to brag, but I'm very proud of myself, and I absolutely adore my community. They are wonderful, fantastic people, and I greatly appreciate all of their support. Hopefully you'll check it out. I'll see you next week.